class people. And if the working class is not empowered, that ecological issues are working class issues, that issues of feminism and gender equity are also working class issues, and that far too often these issues have been declassed. And they've been actually also taken away from the issues of systemic racism. And so I'm going to talk about my campaign utilizing some of these pillars of the Green Party as well as the 10 key values. But yes, so I was involved many years ago in anti-police brutality activism, labor activism, and also activism in support of people who were political prisoners from the struggles of the 1960s and the 1970s and fighting for their freedom. So I have a long background in that. My background in the city of East Cleveland, political activity in the city of East Cleveland, came several years ago when the county attempted to take over our library system. The city of East Cleveland is a 95% black community, 17,843 people, 3.2 square miles. Rockefeller his family used to live in East Cleveland. It was a city at one point that was 95% white and that had aspects written into the codes of their housing organizations to prevent black people from moving into the community of East Cleveland. So they had a process where when a house would come vacant, a homeowners association would purchase the house so that it couldn't stay on the open market and a black family might come and buy it. That dynamic with the demographics in East Cleveland started to shift in the 1960s during the period of the rise of black self-determination movements and black nationalist movements. And down the street from where I live now, there was a rebellion in 1968. And it was one of the most significant rebellions in the history of the United States of America. And the rebellion ended when Carl Stokes, who was the first black mayor of any major city, ordered the withdrawal of all of the white police from the black community in Cleveland, and those portions of East Cleveland as well, to stop the violence. And it was successful. After that happened, there was no more death, no more loss of life. But after that happened, there was a population shift. The conflict, the ethnic conflict in the region became too close for comfort for many of the people, and we had a major white flight from East Cleveland. So if you look at the yearbook, in 1964, 1963, almost exclusively white. Then you start to see, as you turn the pages in the yearbook for different years, you start to see the situation shift from an almost exclusively white situation to an almost exclusively black community in around 10 years' time. From 95% black to about from 95% white to almost 85% black in about 10 years, and now 95% black. And so there are pros and cons to that. I'm going to move forward so we can reach time. So the 10 key values of the Green Party, grassroots democracy, these are essential to the struggle for black self-determination. Because we are not a people largely possessed of resources, our power can only come from our unity and our unified action. The city of East Cleveland is a key example of that. We exercised grassroots democracy in December of last year, when I and others led a fight to remove our mayor. So there had been several attempts in the history of the city of East Cleveland to actually hold corrupt political leadership accountable, but none of them have ever been successful. But with only $700, we were able to organize a grassroots effort to remove both a mayor and a council president from the city of East Cleveland, and we did so. You can clap for that. That was an extraordinary effort. And again, with no corporate support, we had no support in the mainstream media or the local media that was not so mainstream. We had no coverage in the media. There was a media blackout about the level of hostility that the people of the city of East Cleveland had for the mayor. And this is a key point, because it was mentioned earlier that the people have been trained to be Democrats, effectively. They've been trained to vote Democratic, but the people really don't consider themselves Democrats in the city of East Cleveland. The overwhelming majority of the people are non-partisan. They just don't vote because they've never felt they had something to vote for. We are going to give them something to vote for. Lastly, because of the shortness of time, I'm going to speak on the issue of ecological wisdom. The city of East Cleveland was the victim and remains the victim of a serious ecological catastrophe. Several years ago, the former mayor who we recall supported, and the current mayor, supported the placement of a dump in a residential area of the city of East Cleveland. So what happened was the properties that were being torn down by the Cuyahoga County Land Bank all over Cuyahoga County were being dumped, the debris from those properties were being dumped in a residential community in the city of East Cleveland. And there was a woman on the street, it was Noble Road. There was a woman who was 109 years old who lived in a house right in front of this dump. She couldn't open up her windows, her quality of life deteriorated. The last 4 years of her life, she lived as a prisoner in her own home. And she died. Several people have come up with health ailments as a consequence of that dump. I myself, anytime I would canvass in that area for over 30 minutes, would begin to feel nauseous. And I'm 34 years old, so imagine the senior citizens living in that community. That dump has ceased since after we led the recall campaign and were successful, the EPA ordered the shutdown of that dump. And the debris is going to be removed. But this is the crime, really. The dump was approved to fill a budgetary shortfall of $125,000. So our city is in fiscal emergency. We were $125,000 short to make payroll. So then the mayor looked at that as a policy opportunity. They have things called a policy window. There was an opportunity for people to sneak this sort of thing in. There's very little regulation over these facilities in Ohio. And this dump was put into the city of East Cleveland as an emergency base, on an emergency basis to cover the budgetary shortfall. The council really didn't have a chance to deliberate on it, and they voted and passed it. Now, the state recently approved $6 million to clean up this dump, $6 million. To put that in context, our annual budget is about $11 million. So because we were forced by a cut in the local government funding of $1.3 million a year, we were $6 million short in our budget. That created the climate in which we could be exploited in this fashion. But the state, we lobbied the state for the restoration of those funds. And they said, there's no way you can get those funds back. We just don't have the money. But now they have $6 million immediately to give to clean up some other person's mess. In 1 year, they have this money to give us. But they couldn't give us that $6 million over 4 years as we requested. That would have kept us out of the position to need the $6 million now to begin with. This is a crime. This is environmental racism. We have to make sure, and sorry about taking the time away from the question and answer period, I guess. You'll have to speak to me afterwards, and I'll stay here. But we have to make sure that we communicate to people that these values are not just the values of the elites. That environmentalism is not for people who make $70,000 and can drive Priuses, but primarily the consequences of ecological inconsideration fall disproportionately on the poor, the working class, and the people of color. The situation in Flint may not have happened if that situation didn't involve a poor working class community that was disproportionately black. The situation in East Cleveland would not have been tolerated if our people were not poor and 95% black. So we have to make sure that issues of environmentalism become the issues of the working class people. We have allowed, oftentimes, the working class to be used against the environmental movement. People say, well, go build the Dakota pipeline, and the union backs it because it'll give some jobs. But what about the indigenous people whose water source will be contaminated in the event of which will happen, it will happen. What about that? What about your global responsibility? We have to support working class struggles, but not at the expense of the rights of peoples for self-determination, not at the expense of the planet, not at the expense of the future. And we have to make sure that we connect these issues for people who might not otherwise naturally connect them for themselves. So I appreciate the comments that were made before. I'm sorry that I've taken more than 10 minutes. How much am I done?
You're over.
I'm over? Okay.
It's all right.
All right. And, well, I'm going to be over for about 30 seconds more because there's something else that I just want to address. And that is that as a member of the Youth Caucus, it's not just important that we support these values to the outside community, but that we defend them within our own party. And recently, we had a controversy that we had to address in the Youth Caucus about undemocratic statements being made in the name of the Youth Caucus. That is unacceptable. Making people uncomfortable in their own skin, making people uncomfortable within their own party is unacceptable, must be condemned, must be challenged. And the people who feel that they have been victimized by that, must be defended always. And if we cannot defend those values within our own party, then don't tell me you're going to defend them in the broader community. Let me see you defend it where you are. And then I'll have some more confidence that you will defend them for the people outside of the room. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, my name is Jake Ellis. I'm the Director of Party Development for the Green Party for the state of Ohio, and I run the Lorain County Green Party. Mike and Sydney, where are you guys? They're with Lorain County too, right there. Good to see you guys. So I'm running for President of Council in the city of Lorain. There's a specific reason why I ran. So I actually live and grew up in a town just north of Lorain, and had actually never really experienced the effects of poverty until I started living in Lorain and hanging out with some of the oppressed communities there through people that I cared about. And it really opened my eyes to something that is probably one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen in my life, and it's income inequality and the disparity in quality of life that is offered to the poor and the African American community in a lot of these Midwest rundown towns. And to give you guys a little bit of history on that, Devin touched on it a little bit. He talked about black self-determination in the 60s. And after the Nixon left office and the Carter administration took over, Chrysler started doing what's called offshoring. And that led to the decline of the middle class, because what offshoring allowed was for outsourced labor. And the Clinton administration, I think with a lot of their NAFTA, really accelerated that too. So we're at the point where cities like Lorain and East Cleveland, I know I live in Lorain and it's probably very similar in East Cleveland and these rundown metropolitan areas, where the poverty rate for the school district alone is 86%. So 86% of those kids need assistance when they're in the school district. The city itself, I think the average annual income of Lorain is $30,000. And most of the people have usually more than one kid. And this causes a whole range of problems. It causes a cycle of poverty, because usually when you grow up in poverty, you're exposed to things like the prison to school pipeline, which is usually because guys are out on the street hustling, and then they end up getting a felony from it. So the breadwinner's taken from the house, and it's a traumatic experience. It's what's called an ACE. In psychology, this is a traumatic experience for a child. And I grew up with 7 children, so children are like, I really like kids. They're awesome. And if you raise them right, they grow up and be awesome people. And that's why I'm involved in the youth caucus too, because we want to have that focus on that youth. But I guess what I'm getting at here is the cycle, the way the system is set up perpetuates these issues that these people deal with every day, and they don't know any better. And unless you're somebody from maybe another area and you're a little more educated, you're not going to know any better. And we really racism really exists today, and it's probably just as prevalent as it ever was. It just changed forms. And it's really important that we acknowledge that, and that's why we have these values. It's because we need to be aware of the types of disparity people go through. So getting back to, that was kind of, I guess, why I ran, but getting back to what it's like for me to run, I'm not actually besides the Green Party and maybe my professional work, I'm not really like a leader in my community per se. So my approach to my candidacy has been what I know. And what I know is marketing, sales, that's kind of the size of it. And that's given me the opportunity to bring some of that into the Green Party. And I think we've been, Sam might argue with me, but we've been pretty successful at building some infrastructure that drives in people, that's compelling. So there's a saying in the world that really large companies have really small, thin brains, but really large wallets. So they do what's called, there's 2 different processes, and I want to share this with everybody because it's important if you consider running, because you can be creative. You can be really creative. We have the luxury of, maybe not money, but we have the luxury of being probably the smartest political party there is. And even smarter, I would say, than the Libertarian Party, because we don't take Koch brother money, or Koch brother money, I should say. And so, but the luxury of that is we can be creative with how we approach people and how we reach people. And one of the ways to do that is to develop really powerful, informative content that's compelling for people to look at. So, I mean, how many of you guys have been canvassed to before and don't even remember the person's name that canvassed to your door, right? How many? I mean, can I get a show of hands? Quite a lot of people. Most of the room, it looks like. So that's not, so in outbound, we would call that door-to-door. We're flyering. Now, depending on your message, the content, it can be effective, but it also could not be effective. Now, most of the people that we want to reach aren't really affiliated voters. And we also want people that are passionate, but we're talking specifically about candidates. We want to reach people that are going to be voters. We want voters, and to do that, we have to ask them, what are some of the issues in their communities? I mean, do you guys know the issues in your communities where you live? Russ? Or, sorry, I forgot your name.
Oh, Paul.
Paul, do you know any of the issues in your communities? No? What about you, Adam?
Opium is an
Opium?
issue.
Well, okay.
Okay, generally, yes, Summit County, it's huge.
Yeah, so same in Lorain County. It's a huge issue. It's a huge issue. And when I go to the city council meetings, I don't really talk about it in Lorain. In fact, I've been to so many city council meetings, I know that they're ineffective. I really don't even go anymore because it's neoliberal bureaucracy. It's really, it's extraordinarily frustrating to just have to sit into those meetings and very little gets done. I mean, there is some getting done, but when most of the people on the city council don't really care for certain reasons, it's a waste of time to be there every Monday when you could be researching or doing whatever you need to do. But my point is, people care about what they have to say. And if you can highlight that in a compelling way, and I plan on doing it, I just got some flyers. So if anybody wants to go canvassing in Lorain, we're going to be doing some canvassing. And I have a viral project I'm going to be starting with some people that can do video editing. And I have a good feeling that with what I'm going to do, I'm not going to go into too much detail with you guys here. It's not going to be like anything anybody's ever done for a campaign, and it's going to be able to create powerful content that people can relate to because they live in the communities. And that's what we should be focusing on, is the issues that the people face in their communities. And Devin's done a great job because he's worked with his community, so he was able to have a little bit of a different take on it. But I've lived around Lorain for like 5 years, so I'm as familiar with maybe the community as he would be, but it's very similar. But I guess that would just be my big message is sometimes don't get caught up on doing what everybody else is doing, like flyering, radio ads, TV, billboard, whatever we have the capacity to do. Sometimes it's better to just be creative with what you can do. And I'm just going to leave it there for now. I'm not going to go too much more into that, but if you guys want to know more information about what we're planning on doing, I would say sign up with the Youth Caucus and hop on our Young Green calls every month. And I'll go into a lot more detail with you guys there, but to go into the detail with what I want to do now would be extraordinarily time consuming, so I'm not going to do that. But yeah, that's it.
Hi. Early on, we had a state committee meeting, and we decided we have candidates throughout the state this November. We have in Bowling Green, we have a couple of women running for city council there. We have candidates in Cincinnati. We have a judge candidate in Columbus, and we have 2 candidates that we heard here speak. We decided to organize what we call a green wave, in which we're going to be going each day to campaign for these candidates this fall. And it will come, Joe and I are going to be working on that, but we really need people to come out and turn out to really get out to vote for these. We have a chance to win a couple of these races.